Very good evening to all of you and welcome again to this almost a monthly webinar series. And today is special because this webinar is going to be organized on International Biodiversity Day. And as you know that the 2022 important theme for International Biodiversity Day is building a shared future for all. And this becomes relevant because last 2 years have been really terrible, and also climate change and other disaster risks are increasing. And we all know, and somewhere we experts also have this consensus and understanding that nature-based solutions, biodiversity and ecosystems are though long-term, but a short solution for so many things. This includes a lot of provisioning benefits. This also includes sustainable livelihood for all. This also includes disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. 2022 is also important because the 2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is soon going to be approved, and that will chalk out the way for next 10 years of biodiversity conservation, restoration, and management protocol for the entire world. With this, I would like to invite a very special guest who has joined us today, Dr. Gyan Prakash Sharma, who is not only an expert on his own in India, but is also renowned, and he's also an IUCN CEM member, and he has a lot of expertise on understanding different issues related to biodiversity, socio-ecological issues as well. He is presently working as an associate professor of environmental studies at University of Delhi in India. He has obtained degree in PhD from Banaras Hindu University, and he has worked as a postdoctoral researcher at Center for Invasion Biology at Stellenbosch University, South Africa. So that shows that he has a very good experience and is a lot of work that he has done on invasive biology. A lot of awards are there also to his credit. He was awarded with International Claude Lyon Fellowship at London. I'm sorry if I cannot pronounce it properly. Fellowship at Institute of Ecology and Biodiversity at University of Chile. And Innovation Postdoctoral Fellowship from National Research Foundation, that is NRF, at South Africa. He has many publications to credit that are published in peer-reviewed, high-impact, and very reputed international as well as national journals. He is also reviewer of many journals, and also he is acting as an academic editor to Journal of Plus One, that is very reputed, and Tropical Ecology Journal that is published from India, and is a Springer journal, and one of the very reputed old journals published from India. And I would also like to mention that he has served as one of the core group members in last intersession from 2017 to 2021, and with a special capacity of providing his expert guidance on invasion biology and related issues. So without much ado, I would like to welcome him again. And I thank him once again for sparing time on weekend evening. That is indeed a very, very tight scheduled time for a lot of families, most of the families. So with this, I welcome you, sir, to this CEM webinar, and we look forward to your talk today.
Thank you, Shalini. Very generous words. I would be talking about the title which I thought of sharing with you was Intruders in the Nature's Canvas. And before Shalini talked to me for this actually webinar, I said that maybe just give me 2 days time to think over, and maybe I will give a talk or yes or no. But lately I decided that no, I have to, because there's this one important thing which I need to share, and my viewpoints on this basically. So I gave her the title that I would be speaking on Intruders in the Nature's Canvas. So maybe many of you are curious about it, but I will tell you why they are intruders and where they are existing in the nature's canvas. So I have a small slide presentation for you. I will share in front of you. I hope you can see my slide. Is my slide visible?
Yes, it is, sir.
Yes.
Okay. So before I start, I thought of this, animated sort of a picture which I got from the internet, and this was quite intriguing for me. And I thought that probably when I talk about intruders, I should use this picture. So this is an animated picture actually, but it fits into the, the idea of what I am talking today. Intruders in the nature. But this is purely fictional in nature. But I will tell you, there are intruders in the nature which we may not know of many times, but they are doing a lot of damage to the system. So the title Intruders in the Nature's Canvas will fit in when I will briefly explain you the way how the intruders are existing on our planet. And since it was a talk on the Biodiversity Day, which is coming tomorrow, but I thought in the evening, we are talking about Biodiversity Day basically, and the Biodiversity Day, the main theme, whatsoever is the theme which exists, the main theme is to sensitize the citizens or sensitize the individuals towards biodiversity conservation. And this year, the theme was building a shared future for all life. This is a very, important phrase which says that we need to build up a shared future for all life. All life means flora and fauna, life on the planet. We need to have, and this share actually means the sharing of the resources which are coming from the Mother Earth, the nature, right? So we need to build up a shared future for all life in which we can share the resources of the Mother Earth. But this may not be the correct connotation to the phrase what it exists. There may be a different, a phase of it also, in which the other lives are also sharing the resources, and one other lives are also sharing the resources. So what are those lives which are also sharing the resources, which we need to talk upon? And those lives are actually just, okay. And those lives which are existing on the planet, one of the most, important ingredient on the planet is the weeds. And Richard maybe says that plants become weed when they obstruct our plants. If you have no such plants, they appear innocent. So what are the plants which we as a human race are having for ourselves, and what we are planning ahead in the upcoming future? But if we do not have any plants, these plants are plants. They are not hampering any of our plants. But with time, there are certain things which evolved, right? In 1958, a book called as the Ecology of Invasions by Plant and Animals in Plant in 1958 by Charles Entel came up. And just after 50 years, there was this invasion ecology, the legacy of the Charles Elton came up, right? So this was almost 50 years of time. But recently there was a workshop in India, which was in 2018, basically. And we talked about economic and ecological impacts of invasive alien species in India. So the trajectory from 1958 to almost 2018, it's almost a duration of 60 years. So what we have learned across about this invasive species, I will try to make my statement clear by using few, examples of invasions, or few examples of species which have become invaders, and why they have become invaders, and what is the importance of that in terms of the biodiversity. So I come back again. I may be a little philosophical sometimes in the presentation, but I will come down to the scientific aspect of it later on. But the philosophy is also important, right? Once we are talking about, like, say, the development of the thought processes for for invasive species or invasion ecology in the past 60 years. So mostly it has been looked as alien species. And alien species, what the bigger Hollywood picture says is mostly they are detrimental to the humans, right? This is the basic notion of invasive species or the alien species, right? So most of times it has been considered bad, right? Although there are references which say that they might be good for the system, but those are limited references. But mostly they are bad in nature, they are detrimental to the nature, and they are detrimental to economy, they are detrimental to human health, and so on and so forth. But within the plant world, do we have such invaders or alien species which are detrimental to the system? So these plant invaders, I term them as intruders within the plant world. They come and intrude the other plant world. And I do not really know whether they are good or bad at this moment of time. I will not share with you, but you will get to know in the upcoming slides that whether these, plants intruders are good or bad. This is one of the wonderful species, basically brilliantly flowering species, Lantana camara. I think all of you will know about it. And this photograph was taken somewhere in Kerala, in near Munnar. It's at a very high altitude. And this looks so brilliant, but it is very detrimental to the nature. I will tell you how and why. And everybody knows about it as of now. They are very, very detrimental. Briefly speaking, water alien plants, actually plants are non-native plants that cause or have the potential to cause harm to the environment, economies, and human health. In very brief, this is the definition of an alien plant. And when we are talking about native and non-native region, if we talk about, say, for example, Lantana camara, this is the reason in the American part, and this is the reason in the South America part, and this is the tropical Mexican part. These are the native areas where this Lantana camara is existing, and these are the areas, these are the non-native regions where the Lantana is acting as intruders or intruding to the nature system, right? So it has come over from this particular place to this particular place. There are so many species which are existing on the planet, which have moved from one biogeography to another biogeography and are acting as intruders to the plant system or intruders in the nature system, and they are disrupting biodiversity, and they are having problems in the ecosystem processes. I will not go into very details of what they are impacting, but I will tell you a different scenario how these species are impacting the system, maybe a newer version of it. So a similar this is the process. The propagule arrives, it establishes, it colonizes, and then it naturalizes. So once it naturalizes, it starts spreading. So the potential range occupied by the species, it starts increasing, and then it becomes a major problem. Then actually the species act as invaders or alien invaders in a nature system. But why I'm talking all this in front of you? Why should we care about all these things? The reason being is that we have been extracting the resources tremendously from the system. And there are a group of scientists in 1992 which said that this is a warning to humanity that resources which you are extracting from the system and the process of the globalization, there is exchange of the materials or the plant systems which is taking place that could be detrimental. That was 1992. Again, after 20 years, the second notice came in 2017, almost 15,000 scientists. Earlier it was 1,700, and then 15,000 scientists came together and said the same thing after 20 years. So I think not much change was deciphered by the scientific group. That is why there was a need to come up with a second notice. And it also came from the scientists for the invasive alien species also. right? A group of scientists also warned about the invasive alien species. And if you see, the alien species richness across the time has increased for vascular plants, mammals, fishes, birds, insects, crustaceans. So there is a tremendous increase in the intruders, right? And this tremendous increase in the intruders is basically due to the process of globalization. Homogenization of the species is taking place, and these, because of this homogenization, there are intruders which are coming in between of the native species, and how they are harming the native species, I will come in the upcoming slides. But we already know that the drivers of biodiversity, the second important threat is invasive species. These are exotic species which are coming from a different biogeographic zone, and they are impacting our systems. And even the Time magazine also covered it on the cover page. So anything which is covered on the cover page of Time magazine, we understand that there are a lot of importance to the human evolution, right? So it was in 2014, basically, it also came up in the Time magazine. But there are a lot of, international bodies which have been emphasizing upon, to eradicate and control the invasive species, like the Convention on Biological Diversity, Article 18H, which talks about, we need to prevent the introduction and control and eradicate the alien species. But there is something called as policy, and there is something called as implementation of the policy. The implementation of the policy was not stringent enough to control and eradicate the alien species when the Convention of Biodiversity came, the Article 8H came, right? All of us are signatory to it, countries are signatory to it. We missed the HE target also significantly in terms of controlling the invasive species. But invasive species are spreading, and these are spreading at a tremendous rate. And few of the invasive species which I may talk about today will be Lantana camara, and another species is Alternanthera philoxeroides. Why I chose two species is because the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, which are in place now, they are talking about the sustainability in land and sustainability in water systems. So I will talk about one terrestrial species and one aquatic species which are making a problems to the system. So with this, I have got two stories in front of you to tell. The Lantana story, I will tell you, and there is another species, Alternanthera philoxeroides, aquatic species, the story about the damage to the system. So this is Lantana camara, and this is tiger. So there is a huge connect between Lantana and tiger, and I will show you how. This is the Lantana spread across in the forest area, and this is the Achanakmar Amarkantak Nature Reserve, in which this is the area which is entirely covered with Lantana camara. You can just understand this is all Lantana camara in the midst of the forest. And you can see the Lantana camara is almost ingressed into the forest, and there are open areas in which Lantana camara is existing, and there are areas in which Lantana camara has ingressed inside the forest canopies. So this was extremely intriguing for us, that why a species which is existing in the sun and also existing in the shade, and the modulation ability of the species, it's so much so is that a species can ingress deep inside the forest canopy where there is extensive amount of shade. So how all this is happening? So we started with this idea that Lantana is spreading, right? We worked upon for this particular paper, and we found that the Lantana is spreading in terms of its niches, basically. We did an exercise of understanding how the Lantana camara is spreading in its native area and spreading in the invaded area or in the non-native area in terms of niche complementarity. So basic idea was, how the niche complementarity is existing in the species of Lantana camara. So we took information and data from North America, from South America, from Africa, from India, from Australia. These are the important areas where the species has invaded tremendously. You know, the African, the Indian region, and the Australian region. The problem of the invasive species is tremendous, especially Lantana camara. And this is the niche which we deciphered, which is in complementarity with the original niches in the America, or I would say in the tropical America. But this is the niche in by which the Lantana camara has spread and ingressed into the other areas. So niche differentiation has taken place in Lantana distribution and pattern of spread. And this niche differentiation is almost 34% from its original niches. So probably the shift which we are seeing in the niches of Lantana camara is basically the ingress of Lantana camara in the deep forest areas. So the niches are changing, and how the niches are changing, we need to explore upon it, right? We did another exercise of understanding how the niches are changing of this particular set of species. So we did something called as the performance related traits. So performance of a species can be judged through two forms. One is a vegetative form and one is a reproductive form. So we did it for vegetative as well as reproductive form. For vegetative, we did some architectural understanding, and for reproductive, we did how much the seed output is there in that particular individuals. So we did it for the shade individuals. We did it for the sun individuals of Lantana camara. So we did it at a lot of places across the country. And it was interesting to find that there was architectural differences at whole plant level. There were architectural differences at branch level, and there were architectural differences at leaf level also for the species existing, for the individuals existing in sun and shade. So what was that difference actually that was existing in the sun and shade dwelling Lantana individuals? So you can see the difference very well, right? It is more in compressed form, highly reproductive. It is more in dispersed form and less reproductive. I mean to say the flowering is little less. And in terms of the population, the bush of Lantana camara, there are many bushes which are existing in a square unit, and there are less bushes which are existing in the square unit in a shaded area. So there was difference in the density also of the individuals at a population level. So how this architectural changes are bringing about the changes at a broader ecosystem level. So what is happening? The sun-dwelling individuals' primary and tertiary branches increasing, plant reproductive functional traits increasing. This is increasing invasion, propagule pressure at a local and also at a regional level for the sun individuals. For shade individuals, branch length and internode distance is increasing, vegetative growth is taking place, and vegetative expanse is increasing. The invasive species is increasing in its expanse. So the area covered is more. So if we try to control these species, this particular species, Lantana camara, in sun and shade, we will have different results. So we might have some short-term results and we might have some long-term results. So the short-term results would be allowing vegetation to grow. Long-term could be propagule containment, and short-term will be existing vegetation will increase, and long-term will be regeneration of native species in the shade-dwelling, individuals. So why I'm talking all this in front of you? I'm talking all these in front of you is because we have learned many things about Lantana camara, but this Lantana camara can mimic itself in so many ways and try to, bring about detrimental impact in the ecosystem, right? And this detrimental impact could be different in the shade dwelling individuals and it could be different in the sun-dwelling individuals. So the management strategy which we need to take over for this particular set of species in the shade dwellers and the sun dwellers would be different, and it should be different. And that is why many of the management scenarios have failed for invasive species and also for Lantana camara. So we need to be very cautious about designing the management strategy for any invasive species and Lantana camara at the same time. So this is what is something which is intriguing for us. For example, this increase or ingress in the forest systems has led to changes at a trophic level, because the biodiversity is decreasing, or I mean to say the herbaceous species existing beneath the lantana is not growing anymore, and the herbivores feeding on or on these herbs are not going there anymore, and they are moving in other areas, and the top carnivore tiger is also moving in other areas in search of the food. And that is where the conflict with the human comes through, because they move inside the rural setups of the nature reserves, and there is where the conflict arises. So you can just see species is bringing about changes at trophic level, and that trophic level is bringing about changes in the animal and human conflict. So there is a cascading impact of a single species which is existing as an intruder in the nature system. This is one terrestrial species which I am talking. I will talk about another species. This is one interview which was taken by the Morning Context. And if you want to understand more about what I am talking, you can refer this interview in which I have talked about in very detail how in 200 years the species Lantana camara has entered into the nature system, and it is creating a lot of problems in terms of biodiversity loss. This is another species which I want to impress upon and talk upon in terms of as an intruder or alien invasive species in the nature, which is aquatic species. This is Alternanthera philoxeroides, and this species is also known as the alligator weed. And we have conducted a study actually in Wooler Lake. We started in 2008, and then into 2011, we did a modeling exercise that how the patches of Alternanthera philoxeroides, which is actually native to tropical America, but now it is invaded in many of the water bodies in our country. Wooler Lake is a high altitude lake, which is not expected to have that much of alien species there, but it is there. Almost more than 35 native species existing in the Wooler Lake are actually under threat because of the expanse of this Alternanthera philoxeroides. So what we thought of earlier, that how this species is spreading in this particular lake. So we did a 4-year information gathering, and then we started modeling about how much time this species will take to cover the entire lake. And why this lake was important to us was because almost 10,000 households are dependent on the services of this lake. And since this species is spreading very fast, there are a lot of services which they derive from this lake is hampered. And we found out that this Alternanthera philoxeroides may cover the entire lake in almost 14 years when we started the study. In 2008, it will cover the entire lake in another 14 years. This was the modeling exercise we did. But one important ingredient which we not thought of, that nature is abrupt. There could be anything, or there could be something stochastic in nature which could come through in between. We never thought of that, right? And the stochasticity was not considered in our model. But one stochastic event, changed the entire scenario of our modeling exercise of 14 years. What we said that the entire lake will be covered with Alternanthera philoxeroides, it got shattered. And how it got shattered? Because in in September 2014, in early of the September 2014, we know about the cloud burst in the Jammu Kashmir area. And this cloud burst was tremendous. And this stochastic event was, very, very extensive. We know that there was extensive loss of lives, extensive loss of nature system, and extensive loss of, the services from the nature which people are getting was also lost because of this cloud burst. But we thought of that probably this is one of the reasons that we couldn't even actually understand that probably this stochastic event will take place, but it happened. But why this stochastic event is important for us as a modeler? So what happened? This was, Alternanthera patch in 2013, and this is early September 2014. So the photo credit goes to one of my, colleagues, actually Athar. He's now in Jammu, and this entire, Alternanthera philoxeroides got washed off. And if you understand that the Wooler Lake is actually, there is a Jhelum River which emerges from the southern Pir Panjal range and merges into the Wooler Lake, and then from the Wooler Lake it enters into the Baramulla area, the Jhelum River. So in between there is this Wooler Lake, right? So Jhelum River is the input and the output towards the Baramulla, right? But the washout took place and it washed out the propagules of what Alternanthera. In a way, it is good for us that the model, somehow looked to be failing. But what happened is the most dreadful because of this cloudburst. This propagules of Alternanthera has spread across the other areas, other water bodies which are connecting to this Jhelum River. So this would be more detrimental in the upcoming future because the management scenario which would have been in the Wooler Lake, now it has to extend to the other water bodies which are existing near the Wooler Lake. So the stochasticity in the system, or stochasticity in the nature system, is one of the most important ingredient which we need to consider while we need to manage any species, especially the intruders, especially the non-natives, especially the alien species which are existing in the nature. So these are the two set of species which are creating a tremendous loss of the biodiversity. Almost, I understand, 38 species are under threat because of this Alternanthera expansion, right? But because it has flushed, now for time being it will emerge, but again in the meantime Alternanthera will spread, but it has now spread to other areas also. So this is most critical to understand, that management need to have a lot of thought processes going on. This is one of the important lessons which we need to learn from the research. And we understand that the stochasticity, I mean to say, the stochasticity has increased tremendously, right? For example, the population is increased, the damming of rivers has increased, the water use has increased, the climate, the great floods have increased in the system. So this increase in the population and this increase in the system in terms of stochasticity has increased tremendously, right? But missing the stochastic events will lead you into something which will not fetch a lot of answers to your questions. So we really need to consider stochasticity in any of the management scenarios which we are working upon. And coming back to the losses of what we have because of these species, Edward O. Wilson said that the loss of biodiversity is a tragedy. Why a tragedy? Because we as humans are actually dependent on biodiversity for so many things. And I will tell you how and why. And invasive species are somewhere here which are direct drivers of loss of biodiversity, which I've already told you. Using 2 species, there are 100 species, there are 100 world worst species which are existing on the planet, and they are causing tremendous damage to the nature system. And in a way, we are losing biodiversity. And that is what we really need to understand. And since we are losing biodiversity, services are being lost. I already told you, because in Alternanthera, almost 10,000 households are dependent on the agriculture in the periphery of this Wooler Lake, and this agricultural system will be lost, and the ecosystem services will be lost. And somehow, because of that, the constituents of well-being will be lost. This is one species which I am talking. There are 100 and 500 of species which are existing across the globe. In terms of the damage which they are causing to the system, we need to understand and work upon how the constituent of well-being is impacted by that set of species, or those species which are impacting our system. And if biodiversity is lost, the ecosystem services shrink. The ecosystem services extremely shrink. And the role of, the Commission on Ecosystem Management comes in here extremely. There are points which the ecosystem management services has to imbibe in between. But the most important ingredient, when the ecosystem services start shrinking, we start understanding the problems which are emerging. And that is where the role of the CEM, the role of the IUCN comes through, in which we really need to conserve the biodiversity in the best possible way we can. We can come up with policies, we can come up with legislations, we can come up with the ideas, we can come up with scenarios. One of the important scenario which I think Shalini is heading on is the nature-based solution, right? That solution of conserving the nature with respect to the nature's solution is one of the most important ways in which we can protect our nature and conserve the nature. And so with this, can we afford it? Can we afford all these losses? We know, we understand, no, we cannot afford, because we are dependent on our nature's system, we are dependent on the biodiversity, and that is the constituent of well-being, which is actually coming from the ecosystem services, right? We cannot afford, but we have this knowledge with us, and we have the experience of connecting one system to the another. But what is next we need to do? And that is where the role of all of us come as a integrated system, or an integrated scientist working together to conserve nature. The knowledge and the experience, I think we are all sharing and coming together. What is beyond knowledge and sharing? I will come up with that knowledge and experience. Is that how people are perceiving the problem of the alien species? This is a survey which we did for alien species, using the information of all the scientists working on invasive species in our country. Majority of them were covered, and we found that invasive alien species is threat to biodiversity. Everybody said yes. Everybody said yes. But awareness of the management plan to other nations, everybody said yes. Right? Management plans of other nations are replicable in India, everybody said yes. And then the most important thing which comes in here is the dissonance among scientists about invasion ecology theories affects its management. So everybody said yes. So what we need to understand is, among this is one of the most important, another most important is awareness of national level plans for invasion management. Everybody said yes, but their number was limited. But for no, the number was extensively high. Almost 70% of the people said there is no much awareness about the management plans of the invasive species. This is the perception of the scientist working on invasive alien species or intruders to manage them within the society, within the country. And one of the most important constraints which emerged was the lack of coordination among several action-taking bodies. And another important was communication gap between scientific community and policymakers. This was two important pointers which emerged after this, a survey, that there is a lack of coordination and there is a lack of communication among the scientists. We do not talk much about what we have been doing, right? So we need to share our knowledge, right? We need to share our knowledge. We need to explore the knowledge of others and try to imbibe the knowledge and try to work upon for those particular systems without any barrier. But we need to open up for those barriers. This is one of the important constraints. And one way which we suggested was the invasion managers, basically the policy makers, the decision makers, the implementing bodies, and the research institutions coming together and working in tandem with a tacit balance to execute management programs. This is what structuring of alien species management has to come over. There are other papers which people have talked about, but I feel that we need to open up with the other systems to understand the problem, so that the problems can trickle down and people can give their inputs to handle the problem. And one of the ways in which we can handle the problem is the nature-based solutions. How the nature-based solution can give us a solution for the management of alien invasive species. We really need to think over and work upon with that perspective. I think nobody has yet worked upon with that perspective in terms of managing alien species with a nature-based solution perspective, right? So we know all these things, we understand this, and now we are looking forward and heading towards the sustainability. And there are 17 goals of sustainability which are in picture now, right? And the 15th goal, life on the land, and basically the target 5.8 again suggests that we need to eradicate and control invasive species, right? So it is another, set of, expression which has come over after CBD, then HE, then we have sustainable development goals. So we are pushing our, dates laid back one by one, one by one, one by one. So we lost the previous targets. So we are coming up with new targets, but still this target is very fascinating because, and very interesting at this point of time. And there is a lot of coincidence for this sustainable development goals with our country, India. There is a lot of coincidence. And I will tell you what is the coincidence is that in the zero draft of the post global biodiversity framework, the initiative and the aspirations are, we will be on path to recovery of nature's resources by 2030, and we will start living in harmony with nature by 2050, right? So we are at the moment in 2022. We have another, say, 25 plus years of time to live in harmony with nature. So there is a short-term perspective of the recovery and a long-term perspective of harmony, right? But this is extremely important as a country we need to look upon as we need to look upon as there is a lot of information which we already know about, right? I already told you, and we know the knowledge, we have experience, but we need to be more creative at the moment. And one of the creative ingredients is, I have already told you, is the nature-based solution. We need to be coming up with more creative options of managing the system. And this is the way I turn upon to a little philosophical system, the knowledge which is scattered, the experience which is shared, and the creativity which comes over and handles the system in the best possible way. We need to be, philosophical also in terms of executing our thoughts. So this is the philosophy which I thought of sharing with you: knowledge, experience, and creativity coming together and trying to handle the problem. And I was telling about why this time is so important for us is that we are integrating the 17 SDGs. And this year we are celebrating the 75th year of our, independence. That is what we call as Azadi Ka Mahotsav. And we are looking for a system, and we are looking for a vision of India in 2047. And there's such a coincidence that the mandate in living with harmony with nature by 2050 and the vision of India in 2047 coincides and overlaps with each other. And we have so much of overlap in this time that we can do wonders to conserve the nature. And this is the bottom information which I think is which we need to imbibe upon, that these 25 years, the upcoming 25 years are very crucial for us as a country, as a developing country. And since in the vision document of 2047, nature and climate are of prime importance, so as for with SDGs for 2050, this could be one of the ways in which we can try to do our best to conserve the nature. Right. So this is one of a coincidence which the system has given us an opportunity to work upon and try to conserve the nature in the best possible way. And I stop here. I will not take much time. I stop here and I will say that love Earth and Earth will love you. This is the bottom message which we got from the Avatar movie of James Cameron. I started with a bad note of alien species of alien movie of Hollywood that was featured in 1979 by Ridley Scott. And then I end up with a deep ecology perspective that we all are connected and we all are sharing the resources. And that is also the mandate of the Biodiversity 2022, that we need to build a common future or a shared life for all living beings, basically. Right. So with this, I stop my talk and I thank CEM and IUCN, Shalini, Regional Chair of CEM, and Madhav Sir, Focal Point, and Angelina for giving me an opportunity to share my views with you and share my thoughts with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Sorry. For a very, very interesting presentation on International Biodiversity Day. And I'm sure your journey taking from philosophy and ending with the philosophy and at a good, easy note of Hollywood and all the movies, and showing that how relevant it is even in layman's context, that we need to understand the graveness of this problem of invasive species. And very interestingly, you started with the conceptualization of how invasives have been discussed in science and philosophy, and how later on you discussed this case study of Lantana camara in a tiger habitat of Achanakmar Wildlife Sanctuary and now Biosphere Reserve as well. And later on, you moved to a very important case study of Vular Lake. I must say that your students' work was one of the highlights of IPBES Asia Pacific Assessment, where it was showcased in chapter 2 of values of ecosystem, benefits of different species that are in Vular Lake. And then you led to this entire science and the background, how these species are adapting themselves to different ecological conditions and making this competition tough for native species. So thank you for highlighting all this science and research behind your work that is, I'm sure, more than 2 decades of intensive work in different regions of not only Asia, but also Africa. And before we go into the question and answer session, I would like to specially welcome a special guest with us, Dr. Madhav Karki, who is with us now, and he is Vice Chair, IUCN Commission on Ecosystem Management, and he's also our focal point, Asia focal point in the steering committee. So thank you so much, sir, for taking time out from your busy schedule and being here with us. And before we go ahead with question and answer session, I would like to invite Madhav sir for his address to the members, because I can see despite being a weekend, we have some good amount of members, IUCN members, senior members. I see Dr. Professor ML Khan sir joining in. I also see some of the professor from BHU joining in, and also a lot of young professionals, and a senior person from Romania who is a FAO Mountain Partnership member, Dr. Danut, who is also with us for this discussion and this presentation. So that shows that this event has made a good mark, and there are a lot of people who are interested beyond the boundaries. So without much ado, I would like to invite Madhav sir for his address to the members and participants of this webinar. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Salini. Good evening, namaste, everyone. Very pleased, with this opportunity which Dr. Salini has given to again talk to you, talk to all the learned and very distinguished participants who are participating in this talk. Welcome to everyone. Thank you, Dr. Gyan Sharma, for very eloquent and very insightful talk. You have covered a lot of ground. You have started with the intruders in the nature, invasive alien species, the challenges they pose to biodiversity. And then you have also highlighted how important it is to come up with nature-based solutions to address not only the challenge of invasive alien species, but other challenges as well. So you rightly pointed out, and your talk is very much, I think, aligned to the theme of this year's World Biodiversity Day, a shared future for all. I would, and this shared future is the theme of also the Global Biodiversity Framework. And this framework, which is expected to be approved this year, will be the basis of how we can achieve the vision of biodiversity, living in harmony with nature. So thank you very much for the talk. That was very, very important. As you know that CEM, which is one of the commissions of the IUCN, is focused on coming up different and very, I would say, customized ecosystem-based approaches. And most recent, I would say, in fact, a more upgraded version of this ecosystem-based approaches is the nature-based solutions. And nature-based solution is a very comprehensive concept which provides, I would say, basis for all of us how to address the challenges which we have. I would say the biodiversity, of course, is the foundation for all these approaches, and these approaches are aimed at addressing the challenge of climate, challenge of food insecurity, challenge of water insecurity, challenge of health issues. So it's very comprehensive. And just this last year, IUCN released global standards of nature-based solutions, and I hope all the CEM members will promote nature-based solutions with its standards, because not everything in nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions has to involve both, I would say, diverse system of knowledge, scientific and indigenous and traditional and local knowledge, and good practices also. So there's much more in that. But I think, as you have touched upon the issue of biodiversity facing and the importance of conserving biodiversity, I would like to say biodiversity actually conservation underpins sustainable development. Sustainable development, achieving sustainable development goals is not possible without conserving biodiversity. So this is why I think while conserving biodiversity, we have social challenges, we have political challenges, we have economic challenges, we have health challenges. So I think we need to work together not in silo, but in a very concerted, coordinated, and I would say coherent manner we in South Asia have a system where I think colleagues in government, they feel very comfortable working in their own departments. But if we need to come out of this departmental or compartmental kind of thinking and work more as a team. And climate change and biodiversity actually allows you to work more in a team. I think where we can share our vision and share our efforts and achieve this what you call the vision of biodiversity. So I would say that everyone can take action, and I would like to urge all CM members to look at the 22 actions of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And these actions are actually open-ended. They will be adopted as a global, actions. But we all can customize it and add more actions, and that can complement these actions. So these actions are actually, I would say, very, it may sound generic type of action, but we can see a lot of room for adding more actions there. There are, of course, indicators and targets. So I would urge that just taking up some of the, I would say, pleas you made that we all have to work in ecosystem-based approaches, using ecosystem-based approaches to nature-based solution. I hope that CEM members will be promoting the diversity of ecosystem-based approaches, and we can then help countries to address the sustainable development challenges and achieve the sustainable development goal by 2030, and achieve what we call this global biodiversity framework targets by 2030. Of course, now we are in 2022, so we have only 8 years left. But I think countries are already gearing up, and as soon as this targets, these actions and frameworks are approved, we need to zero in on revamping the national biodiversity strategy and action plans of the country. And this is where nature-based solutions and natural climate solutions, they have to be promoted. So in closing, I would like to thank Dr. Shalini for giving this opportunity, and I would like to thank Dr. Gyan Sharma for this very useful talk. And I would like to urge all the members to actively participate in Q&A. I already see you and learn from this learned talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insights and comments about International Biodiversity Day. This is very relevant considering you are also IBES member, and invasive species assessment is, I think, the second review is ongoing, or this assessment will also be finalized by the end of this year. So this talk and your expertise and your experience with ongoing global assessment really brings a lot of insights to the members, especially young professional members who are going to have this baton from us and all the senior people for ensuring that we have more customized solutions to local problems of invasive species. Before we go towards end of this session, I see we didn't expected a lot of questions, but the interesting talk has actually generated a lot of curiosity among members and non-members as well. And we have a lot of questions right now with us. I personally have a question, but I will reserve it for the end. I will ask our young professional, Ms. Oindrula Basu, to please take up the questions and ask to our speaker for the day.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. I will be in and out, so please continue. I will try to catch up. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your presence.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, Gyan, sir, for such a nice and very knowledgeable presentation. Like I gained a lot of knowledge about informations and knowledge about invasives today, which were very new to me. Sir, there are a few questions in the Q&A box. One is from Parul ma'am, and we have the question: what can be biological way of limiting the spreads of Lantana camara with least economic implications, considering this is now being used commercially? And it is a very evident question here, sir.
Okay, so yes, there is a biological solution to it. There is a cut rootstock method for Lantana control, but the control of Lantana camara in the forest areas using the cut rootstock method is not very cost effective. And the reason being is that the spread and the expanse of the Lantana camara in the current scenario is plus 13 million hectares in the country. So just imagine if we need to cut down Lantana camara for 13 million hectares, the cost effectiveness is not worthwhile. So at the moment, the best practice of biologically controlling Lantana camara is cut rootstock method. And the another biological control method is, biocontrol. Then there is a biocontrol method in which they release a weevil which destroys the reproductive output of Lantana camara. But there are constraints to biological control also, because that species which we use to control Lantana camara, especially with this biocontrol agent, the insect, it might impact the other species in a longer run. The insects also evolve, right? So there is something called as ecological fitting. There is something called as host shift. So probably with time, the other species, I mean to say the insect species which are existing on the other plant systems, might get shifted to this set of invasive species, what we use as a biological control, or what we use as a biological control from Lantana to other species. So we have a trade-off between the two. We really need to think over before we start for a biocontrol agent. But the most fascinating, or I would say the most easiest way of controlling is the root cut stock method for Lantana camara. It's not biological, it's a manual control of Lantana. And that is what I impressed upon, is that if we control the Lantana, we cut the Lantana, there are different implications in the sun areas and different implication in the shade dwelling Lantana areas. I hope I answered your question.
Please unmute yourself, Indrula. Please unmute yourself.
I hope Parul ma'am's question is answered. We have another question on your presentation from Harini ma'am, that on Alternanthera. And if you any further investigation on the re-establishment.
Whether I was, audible in the previous question?
Yes, sir, you were audible, sir.
Okay, because I think I lost you in between.
Okay, sir. The other question is about Alternanthera, and it is about whether there were further investigation on the re-establishment of Alternanthera on your part, and if you have done so, if you have noticed any changes in the geochemistry or nutrient recirculation from the sediments that correlated with the re-establishment of the invasive species at Euler post-flood scenario.
Yes. Athar, there are a lot of financial constraints to the work we know about it. And this work was, extremely difficult. But Athar has collected some information regarding what is the sediment load, and how this sediment load and nutrient loading in the system has changed the nutrient concentration of the lake, and how the species is establishing after that. So we have some information, we have some data, but we have not analyzed as yet. But yes, what I understand from the basic information is that after 2014, the establishment of Alternanthera in Wooler Lake and nearby water bodies is increasing, number one. Number two is they are still in smaller fragments. They have not grown into bigger fragments. So probably the one smaller fragment might merge with this another smaller fragment and turn into a bigger patch. There is a possibility, but we at the end of few samplings, we are trying to do some matrix modeling sort of a system and try to understand how one patch is changing to another size of a patch and what is the time dynamics in it. So we are trying to understand. I cannot comment much at this moment because I have not analyzed the data as of now. But yes, I would say it is increasing. The patch numbers are increasing and the patch sizes are also increasing slowly.
Yes, sir. Regarding during your presentations in case of Alternanthera, you explained about the stochasticity of nature, how stochastic events happen. And there's a question regarding that in our chat. Why should we consider the stochasticity event in research purpose?
As a researcher, we face many problems while conducting our experimentation. Maybe it is a field work, maybe it is a lab work, but there are times in which we do face some abrupt events, and that abrupt events do happen in nature. For example, this is what I was talking about, Wooler Lake. This is one abrupt event which took place. But at some point of time, I was sampling for nitrogen mineralization in the dry deciduous forest system. And I was trying to understand how the mineralization takes place in the extreme dry conditions. And the timeline was 2 months in which I had to collect samples and try to understand how the mineralization is taking place. But suddenly what happened in 15 days of time, there was a lot of showers which came through, abrupt showers, which was not expected in extreme dry and summer period in dry deciduous forest. It was not expected at all, but it came through. And once it came through, I took them as the samples, but there was a lot of changes which I could see. So one way, it is good to always take into consideration stochasticity, because in nature, stochastic events may take place at any point of time. Number one. Number two is that if at all we take the consideration of stochasticity, especially in the modeling systems, we can make more robust models of what we understand. Like, for example, we did this distribution model for Lantana camara spread, but we did use some bioclimb variables for it. But using more variables in it may change the scenario a little bit, right? So this is where we always need to be not very much conservative about using the variables. We need to be open with many of the variables which could come as a stochasticity, right? So that is why stochasticity has to be considered while we are trying to do some nature specific work, especially the ecosystem dynamics work. That is where I think we need to always consider as a researcher.
That was a very valuable input, sir. It was very crucial point. We have two more questions in chat. One of them is about how, as commoners, like who are not initiated into the invasive species, how can they understand which one are invasive, which one are non-native, which one are native? How do we understand them? Because it is a very crucial question from management perspective.
Right.
And also, yes, sir.
So what actually is, we all have been struggling with it actually. That's a very tough question, right? How to decipher a black sheep within all the black sheeps, the most dreadful species within the black sheep. So how would you decipher? So what I understand is that with time, the distribution of the species change, right? the more the residents' time in the area, the more the species get distributed in the spatial scale. So if at all we get a non-native species, so all non-natives may not be invasives at a rate at which the invasives become invasive, right? So there is a non-native species which is in a restricted area, and we are monitoring that species for say 5 years or 6 years or 7 years of time, and we see that still it is restricted to a limited area. We are not finding propagules in the other areas. So it means that species is a non-native species, but not acting as an intruder. I mean to say, not putting much of a negative impact in a system. But within a short span of time, if we see any species which is increasing in its expanse in a spatial way, I think then we need to really seriously look upon for that particular set of species, how that species is evolving to spread its expanse in a local area. We need to really look upon for that species. Like for example, recently there are two set of species which are tremendously spreading in our country. One is Hyptis suavolens, and another is Ricinus communis. Actually, it is an agricultural species which has escaped from the agricultural system and is spreading very fast in the urban disturbed areas. You will see Ricinus communis existing in many of the areas, and it is putting a lot of detrimental impact in the urban systems, right? And it is extremely allergic to human systems, right? The plant, I'm not saying the oil of it, I'm saying the plant basically. So once it was in an agricultural system, it was fine, but now it has spread beyond the agricultural system. So it is a escapee now. So it has escaped from the system. So we now need to look upon how this species is spreading in the nature. And for example, Hyptis suavolens, Hyptis suavolens was also existing in a very restricted areas in, I would say 15 years like from now. But now I see in this 15 years, Hyptis suavolens has ingressed and substantiated its expanse in many of the areas where earlier it was not existing. So this is one species which is extremely entering into the domain of invasiveness or invader. And then again, I see an invader, which is an emerging invader, I would say aggressive colonizer at the moment, Ricinus communis, which could actually come as an invader in the upcoming times. So we need to be cautious about, selecting the species, and we need to watch about the species. And the role of a researcher comes in here, that how the species is spreading through. But it is not only the role of this researcher, it is the role of the funding agency also to fund us so that we can see how the species is spreading, right? So sometimes we also did a analysis some time ago that many of the developing countries in which there is a lot of money pumped into the research, they have more number of invasive alien species. But there are countries in which the government is not pumping a lot of money into the system. I mean to say, into the research system, the invasive number is less. But naturally, it may not be the case. In nature, it may not be the case. So nature is different, and finances for funding the research is a different entity. So there is a direct relation that more the income of the country, more the invasive species. But there is a different connotation to it. Maybe more the money is being pumped into the research system, so we are getting more research information. So this could also be one of the reasons, right? So we need to really, balance upon these two to understand why and where the non-natives are existing. So it is an amalgamation of researcher, the stakeholders, the funding bodies, to understand what we are saying and how our information can be proliferated at a bigger level, and how locals can be benefited out of that information. So there should be a trickle-down effect in terms of understanding what is a non-native species and what is an invasive species. I hope I answered to some extent your question.
Yes, sir, a great point. And also the correlation point that It might be that in countries where fund is more, they're identifying more, not otherwise. And this question also leads to another question, a very pertinent one, whether these alien species, invasive species, which might be detrimental to our agricultural crops, can they act significant nutrient in as a significant component in nutrient dynamics and climate regulation in the urban forests like Delhi? And also I'll seek one more point adding to it, whether they are crucial in economics perspective in local communities also.
Look, I will first answer your second question, the economic perspective. There are ways in which people are trying to use these species economically. For example, Prosopis juliflora, they are trying to make, wood coal out of it, right? Number one, so that it can benefit the humans. Second, people are using Lantana camara for making furnitures. A-Tree is doing a brilliant job for consuming Lantana camara for furniture making. And there is Hindustan HPCL, Hindustan Petroleum Corporation. They are using the biomass of lantana to convert into ethanol, right? Yes, these are all the positive things which we can come up with Lantana camara, or I would say the biomass of invaders. But the quantum of production of biomass of Lantana camara or an invader is far, far much than the quantum of consumption, right? And that quantum of consumption also requires cost effectiveness of moving the biomass from the nature system to the place where it is being used. So there are not many cost effective ways in which we can use this biomass to the best of the use what we can. Right. So, for example, Prosopis, we have a lot of Prosopis in Delhi. Can we make coal in Delhi? Buy wood coal in Delhi from Prosopis? No, we cannot. Right. We are struggling for fresh air in Delhi. Right. Especially in these times. If you come to Delhi, it's a, tremendous congestion of particulate matter here. Right. So there are, pros and cons of what we are considering. Right. So this is the second answer which I gave to your second question. The first question is that, can you repeat it? I may not be giving you the correct answer there.
Whether these invasive species are crucial in the climate regulation dynamics in case of urban cities where
Right.
we are seeing so less greenery.
Right. So, for example, I would use the term all that green is not gold. Right. For example, in Delhi, we are in Delhi, and there are two potential lungs of Delhi. We call it as northern ridge and southern ridge of Delhi. That is called as the lungs of Delhi. And that lungs of Delhi are being invaded largely by Prosopis juliflora. Yes, it looks green, but we have lost the nativity of this area. Right. Greenery is okay. If plant is growing, they will sequester some carbon. That is fine enough, right? But in a longer term, what is going to happen? We will be a homogeneous mixture of some species, that is Prosopis, right? So homogeneity is not good for a longer run in terms of evolution. We need to be heterogeneous in terms of composition. Right. So the biodiversity gives you the power to be heterogeneous in the habitat, in the landscapes. Right. So if we lose biodiversity because of certain singular species, the I would say homogenized monospecific species set, the biodiversity will be lost. Right. So that is the biggest constraint, that we cannot, use such species in making the system green. Right. So this is not advisable at the moment, because it has long-term impacts on the ecosystem processes and dynamics. So this long-term impacts need to be considered while using this invasive species for greening, especially in urban systems. I hope I answered, Andrilla.
Yes, sir. There's one more question, very crucial one. Uh, why do the invasive species grow so fast and spread so fast? Is it by themselves, or are we making their environment more suitable with human interventions so that they can grow faster?
Invasive species, I need to answer this in two ways. I would answer in a very simpler way. Invasive species have the potential to customize, to tailor according to the system where it is existing. Number one, right? Climate is changing, invasive species will also change, right? So there is not much of a connotation of invasive species that the climate is changing, that invasive species will not change. So they have the potential and capability. You can see within a short span of time, one species is dwarf and other species is coming up, in a big expanse. Lantana camara, I showed you sun and shade, two different set of environments, light and sun. This climate change, which has brought about, warming in the system, number one. Number two, we have got more CO2 in the system. This warming and CO2 CO2 definitely, if it increases in the system, it brings about, increase in the biomass quickly in the system. And these invasive species have the potential to sequester the carbon in a very quicker way and try to generate biomass. So once they do this, they increase the expanse very quickly, right? This is one of the answers which I want to give it to you, that they have extensive ability to customize themselves and tailor themselves. The technical term is phenotypically plastic. So probably the plasticity of this species is making this happen. Number two, if the environment is changing, this species has the ability to change according to the environment. So if it is tailoring in the scenario of climate change, not many species has the capacity to tailor. So if it changes, then the other species will, not come forward, and the Lantana camara will come forward in terms of evolution, right? So we will be losing species with time. Yeah.
We won't take much of your time, but before ma'am asks her question, I have one last question.
Yes,
As I have been working in districts, and as I see, there's the question of silos have been taken by you sir, Madhav sir. So I see it at the district level as well, and lack of awareness amongst the officials deciding the local management plans as well. So how to tackle that? How do we as researchers take that up there?
I feel we need to follow the Richard Cowling model of mainstreaming the information and mainstreaming the ecosystem services. Like, although he used it for, mainstreaming services, I think we need to use it for information trickling, right? We need to inform the stakeholders. We need to, involve the stakeholders, and then we need to empower the stakeholders to execute the implementation. So information is one, involvement is another, then empowerment is another. So I think the amalgamation of these three, information and then involvement and empowerment, might be the best possible way to manage the invasive species at a local level, right? You can always, like, if you feel empowered, you can form a local student group and try to manage these situations, right? You can try to convince a local forest officer, right? So if at all we want to execute something as a student, right, we can do it, right? I remember about one of the instances. There is a student group in Orisha, which protested about planting of casuarina on the Orissa coast, right? And they the other bodies planted, but these student group were so stringent about not planting casuarina, because the olive ridley turtles will come upon and breed in that area, and that these species will not allow them to breed. So this student group took the initiative and ensured that these casuarina are not being planted on the coastal areas of Tamil Nadu, Orissa, and near the Gahar Mata Reserve, so that the turtles, olive ridley turtles, which come to breed in this area, they have a ground of breeding for themselves. Because if there is a shade, they will not come through, right? So this student group, Shekhar Dattari, I think was the name of that individual, which initiated that whole group, or turtle conservation group in Odisha and Gahar Mata area, to conserve the turtles. So one small initiative coming up from young individuals is taking a long way to the nature conservation, right? This is one example in front of us.
Thank you so much, sir.
I think you have a lot of questions also. But I must say that there are comments from a lot of young professionals, and even from our young professional lead, that Gyan sir has been really a lot of stuff to talk about, even if we give him one more hour. And the eagerness that he has to pass on his knowledge to young professionals and all the participants, I think is very relevant and worth appreciating. And especially when I can feel that he has been speaking for last more than 1.5 hours. I have some questions as well on the subject, but I will keep this for our personal discussions after this session, or maybe later on, because I know.
Please go ahead. Don't worry. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is a very small couple of questions that I had, because we know that one thing is that we really talk about a lot of invaders that are coming from other countries to India. But there is also a concept where a certain native species starts becoming dominant and invading other ecosystems. And a very big example is of Pinus roxburghii in mountains, especially in Western Himalayas, where it has started encroaching the moist temperate forest areas of Uttarakhand. And the results are that spring sheds are damaging, getting fragmented. And also a lot of native species don't have the potential to get regenerated back to these areas. So this is one critical problem that we try to explore. And I think you will be the right person to comment. And interlink two important comments that I want to make here. Somebody asked about invasive species in agriculture. And in Uttarakhand, during my research, we observed that people have started taking weeds in a non-weed concept, where they have started trying to adapt with the presence of some of the weeds. I don't remember, but there are some legume species that they locally called as pulfuli. So they say like there are certain these leguminous species that can be used as a fodder. So that is the kind of adaptation that people are developing. And also with Lantana, they are now making furniture at certain areas, like a tree in Biligiri Rangan Swami Temple Wildlife Sanctuary, and also in Uttarakhand, where there are certain livelihood opportunities that are being given through Lantana. And there was this another context of some of the scientists from UK who were visiting us, and they also stressed on the same thing, that with the climate change, there will be situations that more of these kind of invaders will be more prominent, with the land use changes becoming more frequent, with the kind of different drivers, especially climate change impacting biodiversity and ecosystem. So instead of pushing our energy to go uphill and pushing it back to their areas, because one way or another, we might have to live with this kind of situation more often. And we are already having hundreds and thousands of such invasive species across India, South Asia, and also in different parts of the world, where you have your Indian balsam that is very much popular as Indian springweed in Germany and other parts of the European countries. So I would like to have your comments on these two important aspects, because as an ecologist, we keep discussing that thing, and but at the same time, we don't find which debate or which thought of school to follow. And you, as an expert on this subject with more than 2 decades of work, how do you address these two important contexts, the invasives, natives turning invaders, and taking invaders and getting adapted with this in the scenario of climate change?
Shalini, actually, this is a brilliant question. And we as a worker have always been struggling to answer such questions. And natives becoming invasives, right? This is an important concern. But natives becoming invasives, in a way, how natives turn out to be invasive? Because they actually, put a detrimental impact on ecosystems, right? This is number one. But by definition, it says that earlier the definition was from one country to another country, the species will be non-native, right? But the biological entity doesn't understand the physical boundaries of the countries, right? So moving from one country to another country will make an invader, right? For example, if something moves from India to Bangladesh, it becomes invader, but we share a similar sort of a biogeography, right? So if we follow a biogeography based approach, and we as a country are having, a lot of biogeographic zones, and they are extremely different in terms of habitat, in terms of temperature, in terms of rainfall, precipitation. So if a species moves from one biogeography to another biogeography, probably it could be a intruder or a new species in the area, number one. Number two, for example, there is a species called as Muraya conjaya, which is locally known as meetha neem, if we use it for curry making. So that's a curry leaf actually. Recently, not recently very, but I would say within the past 15 years, what I have been observing is that in the entire foothills of the Himalaya, especially near the Dehradun area, which leads to Mussoorie, from Dehradun to Mussoorie area, if you see the inner forest areas, right, there are two species which you will find prominently. One is Ageratina, that is a herbaceous invasive species. And another is Muraya conjaya, which is existing in the under canopy of these areas, right? But Ageratina, we can understand it is a non-native from India, and it is coming from a different region, tropical America. But still, we have a local species, Muraya conjaya, which is invading inside the forest. That is of worry. And there are reasons that we may not consider it as invasive species, because by definition, it has to come from another country. But the definition is changing slowly and slowly from Dave Richardson's definition of invasive species in 2001 to another set of definition and modified definition in then 2011, then another set of modified definition in 2018, right? So there is an evolution in the definition of invasive species also. That also we need to consider in the upcoming times, that what sort of a definition we are using to identify a native, a non-native species, and an invasive species. That is by definition. But yes, I do understand there are local species. Muraya conjaya is a species which is native to India. It is existing on India from a very long period of time, but it has escaped from its biogeography and invaded to a new biogeography, right? And I think you might have also seen while traveling that it has invaded in the under canopy of the forest areas. This is one answer which might link to the another answer of yours, that how climate change is bringing about the change in the systems. Yes, we do understand climate change is bringing about tremendous change in the systems, but yes, this is what climate change is, that native species are also turning out to be invasive species. Because In the scenario of climate change, every species has its own niches. And those species are adapted to that niches for a very longer period of time. And a species which can adapt to a newer climatic system or a newer environmental system in a very quick time, that species has a huge adaptability or plasticity in terms of achieving that performance ability in the new environment. So if any species which is very, suppose say an endemic species, why a species become endemic? The species become endemic because of its nutrient quality and its atmosphere, I would say the climatic condition across the species, right? That species becomes endemic to that area. But a species which has the capability to adapt to the climate, to adapt to the nutrient situations, can go on to the other areas, right? So the extinction of endemics may happen because they cannot adapt, and the evolution of expanse of the invasive species can increase, or the native species at the same time, because some species might have the capability to customize and tailor itself. Maybe it is native or maybe it is invasive species. So this is, I think, one of the best answers which I could think over for your question, Shalini.
Thank you, sir. This very well addresses my concern about two important issues that I have been trying to answer myself for last almost few years now. So thank you for answering those questions. And with this, I think we are at the end of this webinar. And before we say goodbye and go for a Sunday weekend, I would like to thank, first of all, Dr. Gyan Sharma for his time, because as I mentioned in the very starting, Saturdays are special, and something that was promised for almost an hour got extended to 2 hours. And thank you for your zeal and passion for continuously taking all the questions very patiently and giving whatever best you had with you as your experience on the topic to share with most of us, all this young professional. And I can see when we started this webinar, we were not expecting so many participants, especially international participants. We got a couple of international participants. And there are many participants who are patiently listening to all the answers and a great description till the end of this webinar. So I thank you very much for your time, and thank you so much for your extended time to answer the queries. I would also like to thank Ms. Oindrila Basu for being one of the important panelists and supporting CEM member, young professional of this webinar. The interesting poster that she designed for this event is worth appreciating. I thank you, Oindrila, personally for that. I also thank Dr. Dipu Sivadas, who is young professional lead for CEM Global. And thank you for handling all the technical issues, all the technicalities, and making this entire webinar running in a very smooth manner. So thank you personally for that. I would also like to thank Dr. Madhav Karki, despite of his very busy schedule, and we understand that he is on so many international committees. Despite that, he as a senior person has been always kind and always available whenever we share that we are organizing something. He makes sure that he's there, and he makes sure that he listens to most of these discussions. So a special thank you to you, sir. And also to Mariana, who is assistant to our chair, for making sure that everything goes smooth. So organizing things in a smoother way. And last but not the least, the strength behind IUCN CEM, Dr. Angela Andrade, who has been a great supporter of nature-based solutions and also red listing of ecosystem. And I think both these contexts are, in a way or other, have been addressed in this context, where invasive species are one of the reasons where a lot of ecosystems might be red listed and might also collapse in future. And also highlighting that nature-based solutions are very relevant, not only to be discussed and talked during International Biodiversity Day, but maybe more regularly, because the climate crisis and biodiversity loss crisis both are one of the most pertinent and pressing issues right now for the entire humanity. So with this, I thank everyone and all the participants who have been with us for last 2 hours. And with this, I would like to ask the panelists if that's possible to switch on their video so that we can have a picture of all of you, if it is possible. I know Madhav Karki sir might be around, but if he's not there, that's fine. We have already clicked the picture. But Dipu, if you can switch on your camera and take a picture. We have already taken a lot of pictures. They are already on social media, and we hope that in next few days, our YouTube channel will also have this interesting video that will be a key USP right now for our YouTube channel. So please click a few pictures. We all say biodiversity. Thank you. Yes. So I hope it is clicked. And with this, thank you so much and wish you a very good evening and goodbye from IUCN CEM South Asia. And we hope to meet sometime soon. And the details will be shared on all our social media handles. Thank you so much and goodbye. Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you. Bye. Good night.